So good morning, church. We are privileged to have with us this morning Rob Peterson. Rob is a child of the church who has moved on and is serving faithfully in ministry and in covenant ministry. And so, we take some time to do a little bit of interview up here.
I'm game.
And he's ready. He's got the questions, and we'll try to stick to them as much as possible. But first of all, not everybody here, Rob, probably knows exactly, they probably don't know who you are or what you do. So can you just fill out a little bit about your roles?
Good morning, Green Timbers. Really good to be here. This is my home space. I grew up here. But if you've not met me, my name is Rob Peterson. First and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus like you. But in terms of how I pay my bills, how I work, where I work, I have two roles. I am the Associate Superintendent of the Canada Covenant. So the Green Timbers Covenant Church, we're part of a family of about 38 churches across mostly Western Canada. And my role is to nurture what I would call clergy wellness. I do some special projects, but most of my time is spent on coming alongside leaders and pastors to ask good questions, to be present with them, that they might navigate the ups and downs of ministries, particularly the last 2.5 years. Very challenging to be in ministry the last 2.5 years with COVID. So that's one thing I do. The other thing that I do, I'm on faculty at North Park Theological Seminary in Chicago. And in that role, I oversee a program, a 2-year certificate program in the art of spiritual direction. Spiritual direction is an ancient practice of the church. We train people how to listen to one another and to pay attention to how God's working in people's lives. So I do that. I also teach a little bit at the seminary. And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I do some commuting once in a while, but that's where as I am. Yeah.
Good. So let's go back 50 years. 1972, I think the year started in Calgary.
Correct.
For you.
Yep.
And your parents decided to move you and your whole family out to BC. What were your thoughts about this new Wild West you were headed to?
Well, when you're 11 years old and you are told you're moving, you don't really have a context to understand that. But for me, it's mostly an adventure. I knew that 2 of my best friends had already moved, Glenn and James Ellingson. And I knew that I was moving to their space, and that was a good thing. So really, the move for my family in the early 70s was an adventure. I wasn't anxious about it. Plugged into school, joined life here, got involved with all kinds of different sports, and this became my new home quite quickly. And in particular, because of this congregation, I felt like this was a new place, a new start. So. Yeah. So
you were here at Green Timbers from age
11 to 24.
Okay. And what do you remember happening in your life and in this church kind of during that time?
Nothing. I should say, I just want to say up front that my memory may fail me this morning, but that's okay. But here's what I remember. By grace, I think God began to work as 2 congregations came together in the 1970s, the Mennonite congregation that was in the fellowship hall and on this property, and then the church plant by the Covenant Church of Canada. And I got a front row seat as a young person. So the things that were happening, I think we had a vibrant youth group that impacted my life, and I'll say a bit more about that. But we were part of families who loved each other. I felt like I was welcomed into anybody's home. So lots of really good things. Choir, all of that.
So do you have any specific story you could tell about those early days that kind of sticks out in your mind about something special about this Green Timbers community, the family? Is there one kind of great thing you remember?
I'm going to go with 2.
Okay, 2. Great.
So the one is an important spiritual marker for me. We all have that place in our life when we remember when Jesus became more than just a name. And I can remember in that old fellowship hall, the tiny hall, Covenant Bible College has the evening service that was young students they had a music program, and Pastor Albert Josephson stood up at the end of that program, that Sunday evening service, and he said, "Is there anybody here who would like to begin a relationship with Jesus Christ?" And I knew that was my moment. And he said, if that's who you are, if that's what you desire today, come forward and kneel at the front of the church. And there was no way I was going to go by myself. So I elbowed my older brother, Rod, and I said, "Rod, I want to go pray. You come with me." So my brother, who also grew up in this church, the two of us walked down, in front of that group of 45 people, and I knelt at that railing, and that's when I would say my life with Jesus began, with my brother there praying with me. So that was a powerful thing for me as a 12-year-old, to give my life to Christ, and then confirmation and baptism. So that's the other. But another thing that stood out to me, or something that I remember, is I was, when you're in junior high and you kind of feel awkward and you don't really fit in? Well, that was me. But there were some young men in this church that made space in their life for me. In particular, when Neil Josephson started a youth choir, which I can't believe I actually went to youth choir. I mean, I don't really sing. I don't really sing that well. So anyway, we're in youth choir, and it's in that choir that 3 or 4 men, older than me, began to say, "Who are you, Rob? How are you? Join us. You're welcome into our life." So it wasn't just going to choir, it was like joining a movement of care and love. And I can tell stories of conversations with those men late into the night about faith, about life, about what was going on in my story that really touched my life. So the thing that stands out to me are the relationships that God brought into my life that held me steady through adolescence and young adulthood. So, yeah.
So now, when you were here last time, I don't remember
I don't
exactly
either.
that was, but you said an interesting thing. You said, "I would not be where I am today without Green Timbers Covenant Church." Neil Josephson, who was interviewed here a couple weeks ago, too, and preached just like this, said something quite similar, saying that he wouldn't be who he was in ministry without the opportunities that Green Timbers offered him. What do you think it was in this church community that makes both you and Neil say that, and then you both went into full-time ministry in the Covenant Church?
A few things. One is we were allowed to lead. We were given opportunities to step out of self-focus and lead other things. So we were given I was given opportunity. Pastor Wally Coots gave me opportunity to teach junior high students as a young university student. Neil Josephson gave me opportunity. Pastor Albert Josephson gave me opportunity to be involved in worship, to do a prayer on a Sunday morning, to visit. So I think that was one thing, that I was given an opportunity to try out what it looked like to be in the congregation and offer something to someone else. So that's one thing. The other thing is just the deep, authentic relationships that formed. The Lassards, the Hansons, the Ellingsons, obviously the Petersons, and all of these families, there was an authentic love between people. And that when you're a young person looking at the church and it's real, that makes a difference. They're not perfect. There were no perfect church people at Green Timbers, and there aren't still, right? But for me as a young adult, as a young man, I saw authentic faith lived in their home, at church, on the ball field, and in their jobs. And that for me said that's real. So it's the authentic relationship that probably shaped me to be the person that I am. And that's why I would say, I think without Green Timbers, I don't think I would have had that vibrant love of Christ that was just woven through so much of those early years. So Yeah.
And so now your career is about developing leaders
Yeah.
who are healthy, leaders who listen, leaders who dig into contemplative prayer practices and those kind of things. Did some of that come out of this found? I mean, where you're shaped today, what you're doing today, is that a natural outgrowth kind of these early years?
Yeah. You won't know this name, but Jimmy Varesco is famous for me because Jimmy Varesco moved from Montreal to live with his brother here in White Rock. He was a recovering addict. This church made space for Jimmy Varesco. He was a hoot. He didn't fit in. There were times, Jimmy and I became good friends as he kind of struggled with this life free of drugs. But there'd be times we'd pull up to a light, and he's French Canadian. So Rob, let's sing the national anthem in French. And, it's a red light, we're sitting, he'd roll the windows down, and he'd just give her, "Oh Canada" in French. He's that kind of guy. He's just vibrant. But what touched me deeply is that so many people in the church, early years of Green Timbers Covenant Church, they knew his story, and yet they loved this guy, no matter what. Even when he had some failings, they loved him. That, to me, was foundational in sort of moving toward a ministry of people, because I watched people care for Jimmy. And then I was given an opportunity to care for high school kids, for junior high kids, going on camp trips. All of that kind of shaped and wired me for people and to hang out with people. So that's what I would say.
Good. So now, 50 years later, you're back here at Green Timbers. You look out, very different congregation, different looking, different acting, different building, all of those things. What would you say that you've seen? Because you have working in the Canadian Conference, you still see. Where do you see some of that early DNA of a church plant? Of the church plant, the Green Timbers, still lived out in this multicultural, multi-generational community?
When Green Timbers started, it was predominantly homogeneous. The neighborhood actually was, for the most part. And so what I see as an indicator of this ongoing sense of the importance of relationships that was woven into the early years is that you've continued to develop relationships. And your church, Green Timbers, you represent and look like the neighborhood. And I think that's a very healthy sign. So I would just celebrate with you that the number of different ethnicities that are represented in this congregation, all of them are not all here today, but those represented here is a sign that you're building good bridges with the diversity of the neighborhood. I still hear stories of the importance of love and care for one another. I think that's been the hallmark of this church, the community of care and support. So that'd be one of the things I've noticed.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, and so you've already listed a few names in there.
Yeah.
But in wrapping up this interview time before we sing again and then you come preach, this being All Saints Sunday, during your time at Green Timbers, who have been some of your saints that you would just like to name in a sense of as we come to the table, as we come through this service? Who are some of your saints at Green Timbers?
Well, I'll begin with my grandmother, Effie Munson. She's a hero. I would say Albert Josephson is a saint. Anna, the Hans. I don't know how many times Lori Hahn, is that right? Yeah. Would come up to me on a Sunday morning, and just out of the blue, she said, "Rob," if you knew Laura Hahn, like right there, no personal space, but anyway, right there, "Rob, I've been praying for you this week." And I just really am thankful. She just had a gift of encouragement. She's remarkable. Vionel, wonderful, salt of the earth kind of people. they're on that list. Morley Lessard. I could tell you so many stories about Morley in terms of his encouragement just of my life. For whatever reason, he was a man in my life. His story was not perfect, if you know Morley. I mean, it was hard story. But from the time he first met me, right until his death, he would correspond with me, either by mail. I would get, when I'm going through seminary, really, every month I get a letter from Morley. Every month I'd open it up and there'd be a check in it. That's like for 3 years. That's the kind of people that impacted my life in such a way that I want to be generous. I want to be a person of encouragement because so many people in this church have poured into my heart. They're here, so many of you. So yeah, those are some of the heroes. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob, for this time and for sharing and helping us celebrate our anniversary. And bless you in your ministries and as you share the word today.
Great, thank you.